से ही इसका अनुसरण किया जाता है। आगा खां रूरल सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम इंडिया ने ऑर्गेनिक उत्पादों के जरिए कृषि प्रणाली को पुनर्जन्म देने के लिए अमृत कृषि नाम से एक परियोजना की शुरुआत की है। अमृत पानी एक तरल ऑर्गेनिक खाद है। ये पौधों की अभिवृद्धि के लिए एक प्रभावी प्रोत्साहक और कीटनाशक है, जो स्थानीय रूप से उपलब्ध सामग्रियों जैसे गाय की गोबर, गौमूत्र और जैविक ईंधनों से तैयार किया जाता है। ऑर्गेनिक उत्पादों के प्रयोग से 2000 रुपए प्रति हेक्टेयर की प्रभावी बचत हो रही है, जबकि इन उत्पादों का लागत मूल्य शून्य है। आगा खां रूरल सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम इंडिया ने अवलोकन किया है कि अमृत खाद और अमृत पानी के माध्यम से रोगों की घटनाओं और कीटों की समस्याओं को काफी हद तक सुलझा लिया गया है।
The capital of Plateau State is in the heart of Nigeria's religiously diverse Middle Belt. It's here that the Muslim North meets the largely Christian South.
The selection of young girls, 12 to 15, was deliberate because they are often not seen, particularly in terms of the conflict. Some of those young girls have never seen peace.
In the Niger Girls, we were being chosen 11 Muslims and 11 Christians.
They make sure that in each room, Christian and a Muslim.
We were told about how conflicts can affect the life of someone and how you can resolve violence, how trauma can affect a person, and about empathy.
I discovered that they're just the way we are, no difference. Just that they pray on Friday, pray on Sunday, they worship, they call him Allah, we call him Jesus.
I'm a Muslim.
The policies that we need to combat climate change are already the best practices in corporate America. So today, we're here in Washington, D.C. because we deserve legislators' attention.
There are business examples here of telling us how to do it. Clearly, the leading indicator is the business practices of all those who courageously stood up and said, this is simply the right thing to do.
We really feel it's important to be part of a broader coalition of like-minded businesses who are together trying to create change.
If small-sized companies of all different product makes and consumer interests can do it, everybody else should. We just need to create those guardrails.
We all know what the end point is. It's a reduction in carbon emissions, and it's blazing the path for companies to innovate.
Our hope in signing the declaration is really to demonstrate that business supports climate change policy.
Aspen Ski Company joined the climate declaration because if there's an industry that ought to care about climate change, it's the ski industry.
What are we asking?
Campaigners meet every day under this tree in central Abuja, calling for the release of the girls. It's across the road from the Hilton Hotel, a popular meeting place for government officials. The campaign wants to maintain pressure on the government, who they feel aren't doing enough to get the girls released. They've received threats from Boko Haram and have also faced criticism from the government. Recent bombings and attacks in Abuja and Kaduna have added to the growing fear of terrorism in Nigeria. Many of the group are in daily contact with people still living in Chibok and the surrounding provinces. They hear daily reports of a desperate situation in the region.
Our specific demand is for the government to move quickly to rescue these girls. They have been there in the forest for a long period of time. That is the basic and the most important thing.
We have been told by high-level senior officials that some of our reports were exactly what they needed to put a floor under some of the policies that they wanted to implement.
You can see the impact. The impact is felt in congressional hearings.
I'm sure you've seen the report from the International Crisis Group.
You can see it even in the agreements where some of our recommendations are used verbatim.
I recently wrote a report saying that the Afghan government should avoid implementing new rules that would essentially destroy the party system. The government quietly did avoid implementing those rules. In a chaotic, violent part of the world like this, those small changes can be really important.
We've built our relations with the government and state authorities, but it's more with the armed groups and non-state actors that I feel that we've gained incredible credibility. When there are instances of local conflicts and problems, we're on the receiving end of their phone calls.
It's also the type of work that would allow you to shake the world, but in a very gentle way. And that's the real added value of this work for me.
Both the government and insurgent forces have such weapons, and in many cases it is challenging to establish who was responsible for a particular attack. And both insurgent and government forces deny that their attacks are killing civilians. But in 4 attacks against populated areas that Human Rights Watch investigated in Donetsk, the evidence strongly indicates that Ukrainian government forces were responsible. All the strikes took place in areas controlled by insurgent forces, but close to the front lines. And by examining the impact craters, we were able to establish the rocket's flight direction, which indicated that the rockets had been launched from government-controlled areas. Both government and insurgent forces should immediately stop using Grad rockets in populated areas because of the overwhelming risk that civilians will be killed and injured. And insurgent forces should minimize the risk to civilians by not deploying their forces in densely populated areas.
People are falling deeper into a situation without food, with a lot of malnutrition, with no resources for next year, with no resources for planting. It's a poverty we sometimes just can't grasp.
In Niger, we have this kind of silent crisis, chronic food insecurity. The main food staple, which is the millet, is unaffordable by the vulnerable population because they don't have simply enough money to buy food.
Our population is in very big difficulties because they have no food to eat, they have no money, no work to do.
Esta mañana, 2 activistas de Greenpeace escalaron el asta bandera en pleno zócalo capitalino de la Ciudad de México. Acompañados de 8 activistas más, arribaron al lugar para solicitar el retiro de productos transgénicos de nuestro país. La zona fue resguardada por elementos de protección civil del Distrito Federal y rescatistas del ERUM, además de policías capitalinos. En el lugar permanecieron alrededor de 3 horas, tiempo que tardaron en subir y colocar una manta donde aparecía un maíz mexicano. Luego realizaron el descenso y posteriormente se retiraron sin que hubiera detenidos. En las redes sociales, los activistas hicieron hincapié de que su protesta no fue una falta de respeto a la bandera, ya que su intención fue poner el tema de los transgénicos en el centro del país. Con información de José Antonio García, Cadena 3 Noticias.
Suscríbete a nuestro canal de YouTube.
Provide a safe space for girls, especially teenager girls, to come after school every day and spend their time together. Through mentors, they learn life skill issues like family planning, HIV/AIDS, gender discrimination, and other issues. Also, they have an access of playing games, dancing, and singing different songs. When they are old enough, they can receive vocational training, which will help them to start their business activities. This vocational training includes beauty salon, food processing, and issues like tailoring, decorations, etc. Also, they have an access of receiving microloan, which will help them to run their business. And this loan will expand or will increase year after year.
The civilian population in Lugansk is absolutely terrible. Every day you have wounded people, every day you have dead people, and this cannot definitely last.
Our main concern is the security of the remaining population there with random shelling. The randomness means that you never know when it's going to hit next, and therefore it makes movement very difficult.
This is why most of the people stay home the whole day, and if they can find shelter in the basements, that's what they do. That's also what we did ourselves. The city is quite cut off from the rest of the country. There's no water, there's no electricity, there's no network for the telephones.
Many of the families in Lugansk have been separated, with persons of the families leaving to other areas, either within Ukraine, Russia, or in the areas. One of the main services that we offered was to take the telephone numbers of those people who are remaining in Lugansk and their relatives wherever they may be, so that as soon as we come out of Lugansk city and have network reception, then we can make the phone calls and tell them that they are alive and well. From the medical structures that we visited, we were able to collect lists of the essential items needed for the war surgery, and thankfully our team that followed us a couple of days later were able to bring such war surgery material, such essential material, which can treat up to 600 patients. It's important to note that not even hospitals are safe, that there has been shelling that has hit the hospitals, and of course there are not that many of the doctors still able to work there, because many of them have left. Transport to and from the hospitals is very difficult, so those who have stayed are extremely brave and are doing an incredible job.
And I'm joined here now in Baghdad by Zainab Shakir, who's a campaigner for women's rights here in Iraq from a group called Women for Women International. And Zainab, you were one of those who watched the statue of Saddam being toppled in the square behind us there. 10 years on, has enough changed for you?
Well, the thing is, yes, there have been a lot of change since 2003. Especially for women, after the election and the constitution. One of the things that women really managed to get is the 25% quota to be presented at the Council of Representatives. Lately, the Ministry of Women get approval from the Prime Minister Council on the strategy for violence against women, and it's been adopted by the government and civil society. We know that in Kurdistan region have managed to get the law there, and I know that there will be a long way among the civil society and government to have the law in place at the federal government.
But there's only...
The UN have called it East Africa's worst drought in 60 years. More than 10 million people were threatened by starvation across Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya and Djibouti. As Merlin were already working in Turkana, we quickly expanded our services to assist those most at risk. Many of the nomadic Turkana people trekked over 50 kilometers to reach Merlin's food distribution points. Merlin is committed to helping those in the toughest places and most remote areas to provide access to food and healthcare. We're also supporting 8 health workers in 4 stabilisation units to provide 24-hour care for severely malnourished children with medical complications. When we put out the call for help, you responded generously. In the emergency phase, we've raised over £750,000. But with no rain, seed stocks have long since been used for food, and precious livestock have either been sold or lost to starvation.
Refugee Council recognizes that conflict and displacement can have devastating effects on agricultural communities. In places where farming is essential for livelihood, access to land and the requisite cultivation tools is essential. To address this issue, DRC collaborates with the Ministry of Agriculture to provide strategic farming advice. It has distributed seeds and tools through 19 farmer field schools organized for returnees and farmers from the host communities.
As at the time when we came back from Uganda, they have brought for us the seeds and the tools so that let us unite and work together in order to gain something.
In addition to providing sustenance for communities, DRC's agriculture and livelihoods programs enable income generation through the sale of crops in local markets.
We just get money from selling the goods, the crops which you have planted.
In addition to farming support, DRC implements livelihoods projects that further enable sustenance and income generation for returning communities.